so I call my process that I do an actualization process. And
Hmm.
I learned through all of my years of working and working with people that the only way, the best way to go is to go inside, from the inside, and create a different framework, like almost like a hypnosis experience or um, some kind of an inner story that
Hmm.
will bring the other person through a path. And what ends up happening is those beliefs start to dissipate.
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more. All to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Welcome to Eyes Wide Open. Our guest today is Isabel Chiara. Isabel is a life coach and a guide, and she's the creator of the Self-Actualization process. She's helped hundreds of people transform their behaviors to heal their inner unhealthy relationship with food. She's also the author of 2 best-selling books, Eat Your Word and Bad Behavior. I thought I was going to say bad behavior. I'm glad I was like telling
That was
myself
the
not to mess
pun
that up.
intended for that.
I know. And I just kept telling myself when I was getting ready, I was like, do not say bad, do not say bad. I pulled it off and then I had to congratulate. So, bad behavior. She's also the creator of the new app called Nourish, which is created to help people create the greatest self-nourishing life for themselves. Isabel, thanks for coming on. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
I am excited to have you here with me. I appreciate you taking the time. And before we get into the meat and potatoes, let's just say, of this interview, I always ask my guests what they wanted to be when they were a little kid and then how that evolved and changed and ultimately led you to what you do now.
That's interesting. So, I went to Catholic school, and at an
Me
early
too.
age, they they asked the question in a way. So, how many of you want to be sisters, like nuns? And every little girl raised their hand. And how many of you want to be priests? And all the boys raised their hand. So I guess that was the first thing I thought I was going to be.
That's one I wanted to be too.
Right?
Going
I
to a
guess it's the
Catholic
way people
school.
ask. Right? It's the way people ask questions. It's crazy. So then I thought I had to be that because I already said that, and I think they said something like "in the eyes of God." So this is how influential it was when we were children. But I don't really even think I ever thought that. Again, I grew up actually in the restaurant business,
Hmm.
and I assumed I was going to be an entrepreneur. I never used that word, of course. I thought I was going to run a business.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I did. But that wasn't, I mean, everything's a business if you look at it like that. But that's not kind of what my path became because when I graduated from college, I was like, oh, this is not going to be enough for me. I knew that immediately. And I started studying spirit. I started going on a spiritual path. And when I say that, I'm talking about really, and this was in the 80s, esoteric teachings, past life regression, shamanism, herbalism. So I had years and years, over 40 years, up till now, actually, of studying every new modality that's out there, getting certified. I met so many masters of a lot of these professions and a lot of these modalities. And that's what floats my boat. That's what makes
Hmm.
me passionate in life. And so I always thought also that I had to keep the two separate. I got the business side. Nobody wants to know about your studying, especially past life regression. I was already studying that in the 80s. Um,
Which that was, I mean, how was that received in the 80s?
no, it wasn't received. I talked to my friend just recently, and she's like, you kept talking about past life regression like everybody was on it, and I was really concerned and talking to your family about really we were going to do something. We are going to really intervene at this point with you,
Oh my
and
gosh.
nobody was listening to, no one was listening to that. So I didn't have a lot of credibility at that point. But I have to tell you, that was one of the most fascinating things that I had studied.
What can you tell us about that, if you don't mind me asking? Because I'm open to anything these days. I'm like, honestly, I'll listen to anyone talk about anything because I'm open to it. So, yeah, tell us about a little bit about it.
Well, so it's a way that you go back and you have the characters that are in your life now, and supposedly they played a role in your life in another life, and you come back with the same patterns with them. So let's just say
But do you learn, like, are you learning each time and doing things different, or is it you're like almost
well, that's the
doing it
goal.
over? Okay.
That's the goal. And so when you go under a regression, you're actually in a sort of a hypnosis. I mean, I had some really interesting events happen where one event was, well, I'll just tell you because it's a good story.
Yeah, please
I
do.
was in a past life regression workshop, and in that workshop, I was so in tune with the presenter, and his name was Dick Sutphin. He was actually one of the first people that actually he wrote so many books on it and everything. I would every night I'd listen to him and put myself into some kind of hypnosis, and it actually could help clear different behaviors because you have a different perspective and you start to look at things differently with that person.
Right.
So I was in his workshop, and I went into the corner and I laid down, and when he was processing somebody else and putting them under hypnosis, I was using his voice to do myself.
Oh, wow.
During the hypnosis, two characters in my life came in, I'll say boyfriend and father. And so I had a very intense relationship with this person, but we had broken up. And I went into this regression, and I saw what I thought he did something on purpose. What he actually did was follow his family tribe. He had nothing to do with it, and he was actually upset about it. And I saw the whole thing differently. And I don't know if you know this, but when you are holding on to something, I don't care if it's lifetimes or lifetimes, you hold it in your tissue. Right? So at that moment, when I saw something shift and change that was totally didn't happen, there's such a love that comes over you and that whole experience. And all of that was released from my body to the point where I couldn't get off the ground. Like the pain was so great. It released my body. There was so much pain in my body from the release that I couldn't pick myself up. They had to pick me up off the ground.
Wow.
And I was in pain for the next 4 days during the whole entire workshop.
Was it like a pain, like, if you get a massage and they like get a knot out and then you're like really sore? Is it like that kind of?
Oh yeah, I wish. It was a pain that was, like if you're really, really stiff and then you just can't move and you're like this, it was that. I don't
like
know why it presented itself like that, but it was, I mean, it was profound. But the most important part about it is that this is so good. When I was in that workshop and that happened, I got a letter written and sent to me from the boyfriend that I just had experienced me, asking me to forgive him. Like, come on, are you kidding me?
That's like the universe making all of this stuff clear for both of you. Wow, that's crazy.
That person never contacted me, never would talk to me again. Nothing. We didn't have, the best breakup, but it was, I go, when I got back home, my letter was waiting for me in the mail, and it was unbelievable. And it was such a cathartic healing. So I could feel that whatever I did, we know this, affected that person too.
Yeah.
And believe you me, that person's not an apologetic person or never looked at anything in their life, but they had that experience too. Like they had the wherewithal at some level to write a letter asking to be forgiven.
That's so crazy. Like that's why it was like, that's like some sort of divine universe intervention. Like you released it and they felt something and felt inspired to write that letter.
Right.
So did you
to show you that if you do your own work within you, the other person, which is a lot of the work that I do, like I have moments and I have a lot of sessions with people where the other person is feeling their work and their release, their shift of perspective. And what ends up happening is they end up having a different relationship with that person or even that gender.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's an incredible story, and like I totally believe in like past lives and all that stuff. So it doesn't seem far fetched to me. Maybe in the '80s it would have been, but I was also a
Oh yeah,
kid.
in the 80s, forget
Yeah,
it. It was off the charts. But
yeah,
it was normal. Like I thought that was normal.
yeah. Well, it's funny because like I have a friend that I've been friends with for a long time, and she's always talked about spirituality and stuff. And like as I've gotten older, and I'll say wiser, dare I say wiser, older and wiser, like makes a lot more sense to me than it did 15 years ago. It's like you just
Right.
kind of open your mind to it
Right.
and kind of get rid of these societal normal
Right.
quote ways of thinking, and a lot of stuff. Like I think the universe speaks to me all the time. And so there's all sorts of things that if you believe in that, like you go further and further and further. We're just energy. We're all energy.
Right.
So
And I feel okay. So then, by the way, in the 80s, nobody was ever said the word energy.
I
And I
know.
would always describe company. I would always describe whoever's running a company. The company takes on the energy of who's in charge of the company. And people would say, nobody talks like that.
I can't believe your
Use
friends were going to do an intervention. Like,
intervention on me. No one talks about energy in a company. But I would walk into different. Because I'm in the restaurant,
yeah.
business. I would walk into different restaurants, and I was like, "Hey, I know the kind of managers that is managing this place.
Mm,
I know what's going on here. You could, have you ever walked into a space? And everybody does. They just aren't. A lot of them aren't conscious of it.
yep.
They walk into different businesses, and they know like who's at the helm. You could tell what the qualities are of the person
Yep.
at the helm,
Yeah,
right?
I agree. I've always been that way, and I didn't really know what it was until probably 10 years ago or so. Like I'm turning 40 this year. So I I used to like have these energies and these feelings and like pick up on people's vibes, and I didn't really know what it was until I started opening my mind to this stuff. But now like my intuition is 99.9% of the time the right feeling. You
Right.
can totally sense, well, I can walk into a place or meet people and tell, sometimes like just walking by them, sometimes I can get like a
Right.
vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very,
You hear it or do you feel it?
I feel it. I feel it
Yeah.
more than I hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like in my chest, sometimes like I'll feel it, or in my stomach, I'll kind of get like a knot if it's
Hmm.
something uncomfortable.
Right. And you're like, okay,
Yeah.
exit stage right.
Yeah, exactly. And fast.
You shouldn't be here right now.
Yeah. So you've been doing a lot of work for a long time now, and you wrote 2 books, and I want to talk about all of this, but how would you describe the work that you do to someone who doesn't know who you are outside of the introduction that I gave you and then
Hmm.
what we were just chatting about?
Hmm. Um, so the part of the work I do that I think is most important is the foundation. And that's the part where I think I see and I feel somebody's potential. And just by being around them, like
Hmm.
just from talking to you or from being around somebody, I can see their potential. But I also can hear and I can see their blocks
Okay.
and their limitations. And it's interesting. I start to hear what the story is too. Not even knowing their story, but I can hear their, um, oh no, I can't do this, which is a basic one. Um, oh, that's not going to work. Or whatever their story is, I can almost hear um, how they're not going to go past that unless they could see it differently. And so I call my process that I do an actualization process. And
Hmm.
I learned through all of my years of working with people that the only way, the best way to go is to go inside, from the inside. and create a different framework, like almost like a hypnosis experience or some kind of an inner story that will bring the other person through a path. And what ends up happening is those beliefs start to dissipate and start to move past, their conscious mind.
Yeah.
And because I always also realize that there's nobody's going to change by willing themselves to change. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Like, that doesn't really work a lot.
Do you feel that way about like manifesting stuff too?
No, because, well, I'm talking about behaviors, outward behaviors that you're trying to get rid of. But as far as manifesting, no way. I'm so on the.
Okay.
I heard you ask one of your guests what their favorite book was, and I was thinking about, hey, what is that for me? And there's this book called Creative Visualization that was written by Shakti Gawan. Have you ever heard of it?
I don't think so.
Okay. So she did different techniques, and I found her name on a workshop she was doing in the 80s, again in Boston. I was walking down the street of Boston and I saw this workshop, and I go, don't even ask me why. I picked up a paper on the ground and it was raining, and I looked at it and I go, oh my God, I have to go to this. I have to go to this. And then I found out she was in New York the next weekend, and there was room for me. And I was in her workshop, and it was the best thing I've ever done in my entire life.
Oh, wow.
And her techniques were about seeing and feeling what you're creating. But again, this was in the 80s, and nobody was talking about manifesting. Nobody used the word creative visualization. Nobody, and here I am making my whole life about creative visualization. And hey, you want that? Just do creative visualization. Oh, you want this? I'll help you. Creative visualization. So it was just a technique that I kind of lived my life by at that
I feel like
point.
it's so common now, or maybe it's the
It is.
excuse me, the algorithms I'm in, but people are always talking about visualizing what they want and manifesting the life they want for themselves. And I mean, it's so common now. You're not like
Because
in
there's
some
like 20
creepy
million
cult.
books written on it now, and everybody's kind of doing it. But it does work. It does work.
Yeah.
But I also believe you have to you have to recognize the power of the way you were. Always recognize the power of where you were and the power of where you were in your beliefs too.
Well, I've heard you talk about this previously too, which I'm glad you brought it up. And the way we talk to ourselves and the way we view our life experience and the things that happen to us, that is a very, probably single-handedly, in my view anyway, one of the most powerful things that determine what the outcomes are of your life and the outcomes are of the things that you do in your life. So what, in your view, what role does the way we talk to ourselves and the way we frame things play in some of the decisions we make and the experiences that we have, and even how we reflect on them in some cases?
Right. Well, funny, because in the last few years, and it's the title of my app, and it's the title of my next two books. One's coming out in April, and the other one's coming out next year, is that concept of Nourish allows us to have a framework for ourselves of, like a joyfulness toward ourselves, or a respect for ourselves, or we're lighter on ourselves. We're not being the parent. We're no longer being the parent of ourselves. So if we look at our journey in life as a journey and not, okay, let's get this done now, because the chances of us when we do that are, less than if we allow ourselves, because we figure out why we're really going toward this path. So I like to say we're on a path. Our journey is this path, and we're never in the wrong place in our path. We're always in the right place. It's not good. It's not bad. We're not judging it. And we begin to release the judgment, because if we're sitting there judging ourselves, it's like we're a parent or another kid that's bullying or throwing throwing ourselves down on the curb, and we don't let ourselves up till we get that whatever we're trying to create done.
Yeah, I've talked about the inner critic before, and that's kind of, it's very similar, where I have that, and I have to work very hard because I'm a perfectionist. I'm very hard on myself to do things, and I'm like never happy 100%. And
Right.
so I have to like tell that inner critic, like, shut the F up,
Right.
because,
Which
you
is
know,
even being more gentler with yourself.
right. Exactly.
I think we start to change. So if I say the word nourish to you, right? Nourish, it has like a nice flow to it. It has a nice tone to it, right? And so I would have come to start to do is actually say, oh, this is nourish. Like I was anxious, of course, coming on your program because I thought you were such a prolific speaker. And so I said,
Thank
oh my
you.
God, I'm so nervous coming on Nick's program. But I kept saying, well, it's going to be a really nourishing. I'm going to connect with him, So then I have another story that I bring into it, right? I'm saying, oh my God, it's going to be nourishing. I'm going to enjoy his conversation. It'll be fun. And so now I put that kind of conversation, because the conversation on
Yeah.
the other end really wasn't pleasing to me or at all.
It probably wasn't going to make you feel very confident coming on here either.
No, it was making it, I was starting to feel anxious. But the thing is, even with this Nourish app, and the more we start to say the word nourish, we begin to take a pause, and we could choose how we want to feel. I mean, not just regarding our feelings,
Love
but our
that.
feelings can bring us to another storyline. I think it's all about the story.
Yeah, that's a good point. The way you sort of, first of all, one of the things you said is I wanted to touch on too. You are right where you're supposed to be. There's a
Right.
lot of times in the last few years where I had to remind myself that very forcefully again, not being too
Mhm.
nice to myself. But I call them side quests. Like, your destination is your destination. You may have some side quests, but those are exactly where you're supposed to be. So I love that. I just wanted to harp
Mhm.
back on that. But the word nourish, and what I like reading about it on your app and reading about it on your website and stuff like that is you are defining it in like how people use the word is never really about like themselves outside, maybe like, oh, it's nourishing to have water or something like that. But the way you're kind of doing it and applying it to the way people think about
Mhm.
themselves, I think is really powerful, because it's not just stop the negative self-talk, stop the critic. It's actually like, these things are going to be very good for my mind and my body and all of that stuff.
Well, actually being nourishing, right? And
Yeah.
then you could apply it to everything. So if we're working out, and we are working out because we have to work out and there's no enjoyment in it, what if we took that particular behavior of working out and created almost like a ritual around it and made it so nourishing, and bring in, later on during the day also different aspects of that workout so that it integrates in our system and it has like a triple effect on us, or
Mm.
more of an effect on us, because oh my God, that was so nourishing for us. And our body starts to like rise up because it's appreciative. And we start to feel like that in our system. But it's not just, a workout. It's about, setting a table for ourselves because we eat on the run, and we say, okay, I'm going to nourish myself with this. I don't care if it's something that you say you can't have, like if it's carb or sugar or whatever. But if you just
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, I'm having this because it's nourishing to me right now, and it's going to be okay. But then the next time you go in, you look at it and it might not be as nourishing to you at that moment. But the fact that we're starting to bring these questions or feelings into the process or the path or the journey of our day is creating a whole nourishment perspective for ourselves is just it just leads to joyfulness and happiness. And I think we're all like looking for that, because
I agree.
it doesn't make us happy to demand of ourselves.
No, it really doesn't. And I hear
Right.
no, it's stressful, and it's one of the things that I work on in therapy, is kind of not being so hard on myself. And so like I ate pizza twice this week. Like, that's not, I could eat pizza. Pizza is nourishing to me every single day. I could eat it for every single meal, every single day. Love pizza and burgers. Those are the two things that I could just eat all the time. Right. And so, I was kind of beating myself up on it. I made myself work out twice one day. And it's just like, dude, you just
So
enjoyed a
you did
pizza.
that, and then you punished yourself.
I punished
Or you're
myself.
saying it's a punishment.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So and I'm conscious of it. And I think a lot of people probably aren't even conscious of sort of that inner dialogue that they're having and the influence it has. So that's why I think it's such an interesting perspective to speak about these things as nourishing, even if it's just nourishing for that moment or that given time in your life.
Right. Yeah. What if you allowed yourself to have that pizza and you said, oh my God, this is so nourishing to me. I love it. I love everything about it. And then the next day, maybe something else has come along for you, or you're open to something else. What else can I have that's nourishing?
Right.
I get to have something else that's nourishing for me.
Yeah. And I wanted to, since I brought up pizza, I wanted to ask you about.
Don't ask me how to quit eating pizza.
No. You know what? I honestly I love pizza and I love burgers, and I don't care. Like, I'm just going to have them sometimes.
It's good.
It is what it is.
We're letting ourselves off the hook, right?
Exactly.
Right. And our life has another tone to it.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the other things that I wanted to ask you is, I know you work with people, changing their relationship and habits around the food that they eat. What are some of those things that you see with your clients that, over all of your experience, that have really been their relationship with food, like what they struggle with? Like, I think so many people obviously struggle with food, and a lot of people, we have a lot of eating disorders. We have all sorts of things going on in our food relationships. But what are some of those main struggles that you consistently see with people that you work with?
So beside the food part of it, there is the things that really get a lot of bang out of the app is what's triggering them. Like, what are the triggers in their life? It's not just food. There's something that happens before the food, because we're kind of doing food as a way to be okay with whatever's happening. And then there's a way to feel safe, right? They want to feel safe. They want to feel okay. So, it's really what triggers people. And there's not that space between something that happened and the conversation that's going on with what's happening with them. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to go have something. I'm having something right now. We're not even thinking about it. So, one of the activations that I actually have is an activation that's called "What's in Your Inner Fridge," and it's struggling to understand triggers that happen to us and then transforming our response to it. So one of the responses is definitely, let's go reach for something. Let's have some chocolate. Let's have something. And then there's no break in between. But what if we looked at that? Because a lot of the triggers were created at an early age. They were created as when we were children, and something happened. And thank God we had food, because we were able to look at food as it became a savior for some of us to check out, because being in a situation would have been too much for us. So we were protected on some level, and we were smart enough to have food, is another way to look at it. So we get to be grateful for food being there for us.
That, and that's there. Yeah. It's like a blankie, right? It becomes like a blankie when you're a babe. It's funny you say that, because I recently, the last maybe year or so, I realized that when I get super stressed out or depressed, I go back to macaroni and cheese, Franks and beans, all these foods that I loved and ate as a kid. And it's like comforting I don't know what is going on up here with this, but like it's comforting to me to like go back to eat these things that I ate as a kid.
Right. It's the best thing
It's
in the world, right?
Yeah, and they are delicious, don't get me wrong, but like it's funny because I do think there's maybe a level of like comfort in one, the convenience, but two, just kind of like thinking back to a time when things were a little bit maybe easier. The taste buds kind of take you back.
Right. But like, how intelligent were we that we figured out, whoa, okay, this is okay. I feel better.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
strange.
I don't care if mom was yelling or dad was yelling or what they were ignoring. I'm going to eat and I'll be okay.
Yeah. Now, do you think the triggered thing's interesting? And I've not thought about relationships with food in this way. I think this is a very interesting conversation to explore a little bit more. And one of the things, another thing I should say that I wanted to ask you is when people are getting triggered, just like you would go, do therapy for other things, like when people do get triggered and they, maybe self-sabotage around food or have that relationship with food, what are some things that you would advise people to think about or maybe slow themselves down before taking a reactive approach?
That's so funny because one of my activations is sabotaging self. Yeah, it really is. And I try to pick themes that were really underlying every single behavior that we had.
Yeah.
And so we're really I think that noticing that we are sabotaging ourselves, and that's like kind of a behavior that we're starting to notice, and that there is a solution to shift that within us. And that some of it is the talking, more gently to ourselves and not blaming ourselves and not letting ourselves feel guilty. But in this activation I have, it's really bringing these sabotaging parts, because they're all different parts, to consciousness. And the more we bring them to consciousness, the more we begin to take a pause when we bring that part of us and what the parts are to the surface. Because a lot of behaviors, well, let's face it, most of the behaviors we do that we don't love we're looking at the end result, but we can't control those behaviors. But if we are looking at it, looking at where it started, and in the Nourish app, in these activations, what ends up happening is we bring in the inner child, the one that had the first experience of when they started sabotaging themselves. And then we start to bring in an inner guardian, which is a person that's not necessarily your mom. It's not your mom. It's not your dad. It's really a kind of higher being of yourself that's there to listen, to be curious, to see what you want, to see what your needs are. And once you start to feed or feel your own needs, you're able to take a pause and shift the behavior.
Why do you think we are so disconnected? This isn't like an official question. You can answer it however you want. But like when I hear you talk about that, like like common sense, like listen to your intuition, listen to your inner self. Why do you think we're just so disconnected from these types of visualizations for ourselves?
Well, because we chose to do food or drugs or something else instead of listening to
the wine I told you I was thinking about having when we were recording this podcast.
What? That we chose something else instead of ourselves. Everybody's before us. How's that?
That's good. That's true. That is true. And that's always been a game changer for me when I started asking myself, like, how is this serving me? No, if it's not, why am I doing it? Because you're not looking out for you at number one. Nobody is. It is that simple.
Right. But do we really mean that? Like, do we really feel that way? Is that true? Like, are we putting ourselves first? And I'm not saying that in a selfish way. I'm saying, are we seeing what we really need? Are we seeing what's really going to feed ourselves, like really deeply and really consciously? Like
No, I don't think so.
This almost is like, this app is almost as a way to really look at it and really train ourselves. And I'm not claiming, anything. I'm not claiming that, I'm 100%. I'm not claiming that at all. It's a process. It's a path, but at least you're on the path.
Yeah.
And we know that there's results because it's very obvious that there's results as you go along this path. Because the truth is, if they're listening to you right now, right, they're really getting conscious.
I'm trying. I'm trying to
Right.
wake people
They're
up.
they're getting very conscious, and you're bringing people to the forefront that can really help people and can really they have something to offer. And there's plenty out there right now.
I completely agree with you. And I think I think there's like a level of consciousness. The last few years, I really think COVID kind of opened people's minds a little bit
Mhm.
more, at least in general. And I think there is a level of consciousness that people are coming to, and they just need a little bit of nudge and help. And so you've been coaching people now for a long time, and
Mhm.
then you've written
I
a
like
couple
to
books.
I like to think every single time I talk to somebody, not that they like it, but
Oh yeah, it's. Hey, that's an awesome way to think about it.
right,
It's an awesome way to think about it. I just think I'm triggering people most of the time I'm talking
yeah,
about this kind of stuff.
I agree with you too. That one. People don't want people don't want things in their face,
No,
and
they don't.
they want to ask for what they want. They don't want someone telling them what they want.
No,
So I know that's the case for me, and so, but
me
it's
too.
hard. It's hard when you see things and you notice things. I have a new one for myself. It's like, okay, they didn't ask you yet, so don't even offer.
Oh, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one, actually. I should take that because I sometimes feel like I'm a walking trigger warning. I mean, I'm
Right.
just like, I just had my episode this week with Dr. Jabin Moore, and we were just talking about, he's a functional medicine doctor, and we
Mm-hmm.
were just chatting away about, oh, all the water in the US is poison and toxic or full of toxins. I shouldn't say poison, but there's like 170 million Americans that are drinking radioactive water. And you just like, you go into these things and it's like, nobody wants me to walk into a room and talk to them about how they need to get a reverse osmosis system so that they can drink clean water. but that's how I feel like I walk around. I'm just like a walking trigger warning for people on all of this kind of stuff.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel the
So,
same way, by the way, about water as you are right now. I
uh,
get so triggered if it's, I can't even drink out of a plastic bottle anymore.
oh,
But
I know. Microplastics. You can't
right,
do anything anymore.
right.
Like I just can't it's like
But can we
can't breathe the air, can't drink the water, can't eat the food. Like,
but can we say seriously that all of this, because I always try to find the spin.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so can we say that all of this is bringing all of it forward for everybody to create that collective consciousness around, okay, we're not doing this anymore. Let's figure out, because there's a lot of things that are being invented right now
Mm-hmm.
that are amazing. Like, even I just saw that for pain, they just invented, instead of like oxycodone or something like that, they came
Yeah.
up with a nondescript, like an organic one that doesn't affect the mind, or it doesn't have any addictive process
Oh wow.
parts to it. And that's like on the forefront right now. It's already
Yeah.
invented, actually. So I mean, there's so many things now that are for the heart, and there's so many things being discovered right now that are up.
Yeah.
And so maybe it took all of what happened for everyone to buy into, like, okay, that's not working for any of us anymore. And so now here we go. And now there's room for these other inventions to become, part of our mainstream, and maybe set us on a new course of life
Yeah.
for really putting the human first, or really checking into anything that's being put out there in our world.
I actually completely agree with you. I think over the last few years, there's been so much stuff that's come to light about our health, our environment,
Mm-hmm.
how we do things, that people are kind of waking up and being like, you know what, this isn't working for me and my family anymore. And I think that's
Right.
ultimately a good thing, because then, excuse me, I'm just getting over being sick, and my voice is like, decides sometimes it's just going to be like, yeah, we're not going to work for you for a little bit here. So I apologize for
You're gonna have
that.
to listen.
I know. I was going to say, I didn't have any issues all day today. And I almost was going to tell you at the beginning, you might be talking a lot more than normal, because having voice issues, and then it pops up, of course. But 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 yeah, I think there's been some really good progress in the last few years of kind of like this awakening of things that really aren't working for us anymore. I think it's a good thing. I just want it to happen faster. I mean, for like 10 years, I've had a Berkey water filter. And I remember when I first had this and I was telling people why it was, it was removing toxins and fluoride and all this stuff. And people thought I was a quack, kind of like you probably felt in the 80s. And now it's like,
90s,
oh,
90s forward.
Now it's like, oh yeah, we should probably have clean water in the United States of America, like coming out of the tap. We should probably have that.
I talk to people in Europe and they drink water from, the streets because they have the old aqueducts there and the old fountains and everything. And I'm like, where can I get water? I got to go into the bar and get like some water. And they're like, no, there's a fountain over there that you're going to drink out of. And I go, no.
I know.
Isn't that crazy? They don't know that, that there's that sometimes the water here is not as great, or they don't know that.
Oh, when I go somewhere that I'm not familiar with, I assume the water isn't good and I get like a couple gallons and do that. Like I just got back from Indiana this week. I'm like, I don't know if the water here is okay. So we stopped at Costco and got like 300 water bottles. Which are, microplastic city. But
crazy. I know in my car, I have like 10 water bottles at all times just in case. It's kind of,
it's like protecting your hydration.
Right. What if something happens and I'm not going to have water? When I go from here to there, a mile down the road.
Hey, it's better to be safe than to be sorry, I would say. Because if you get thirsty or something happens in that mile, you're going to be happy you have that water. I want to go back to the app, which I believe just came out recently, right? Within the last few months.
It did. Yes.
Yeah. What inspired you to start this app, and what are you hoping that it helps people with?
So what inspired me? Well, because I was taking people through these stories and I was taking people to the beginning of the time when they came up with this. Like I would ask like, hey, how did you come up? What do you mean? I don't understand. What made you even think this in your life? And now, oh, look what's happening. So I just started putting them together. I started writing them. I started using them. And then I formally started writing them out. And I would record my sessions just so I could get the words and stuff. Because, when you're kind of talking, your things come out.
The best stuff.
You're in another state of mind when you're working like that, and your things start to come out, and it's like gold. So I started recording them, and then it's so interesting. You know how life shows up for you. The universe brought me a producer that could produce really well these recordings for me. And
how did the producer come into your life?
Because I met him I was somewhere and I said, well, what do you do? And they're like, oh, well, I produce music. And I go, could you produce meditations? Oh yeah, I can produce meditation. As a matter of fact, like I'm free.
That's
so I hurried
awesome.
up and put them all together, and it wasn't quick because I had to also train my voice a little bit. And that person showed up for me too.
Someone to train your voice?
2 people. I was in a conference and one person I said, I think I need a voice teacher. I was saying this to myself. I think I need a voice teacher. So I go, we all are having lunch. I'm sitting next to this girl and I go, hey, what do you do? She goes, I'm a voice teacher. And like, we're really good friends now. And then funny, right? And then I was in another conference group, and I made friends with this woman, and she goes, I think I have a client for you. And I was like, really? Okay. give me her name. And then I called her up and everything. And I started talking to her and everything. And she started telling me how she was a voice teacher, a voice coach. And she also was, did a lot of other things too. And I go, oh my God. And I was working with her. She was interested in abundance, right? Work. And I go, oh my God, your life is about to change. Puff, you're abundant. You're going to work for me. So it's funny because I think that from, manifesting and stuff, like when you start to think about what you need in life and the magic of people showing up in your life to help you. Mm-hmm. I mean, if it's your time to produce certain things or, go to certain areas of your life, I feel like, the world just shows up for you. The universe kind of brings things to you, especially if you're open.
I completely agree with that. If you listen to the universe, it will talk to you and it will send you things. It'll send you messages. It'll introduce you to people. I remember I have someone who became a good friend. I actually haven't talked to her in a little while, but I was at the gym, and this is like interesting because it touches on a couple different points of our conversation. I was at the gym a couple of years ago, and I just wasn't feeling it. I just didn't want to be there. And I always would finish up my workout by doing like 200 push-ups. Okay. Oh. And I know. I still don't
credit for that.
Well, when I did it consistently, yes, I don't anymore. But
I say if you do it once, you're good.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, you're good for a while. I was like not feeling it. It was a bad workout. I was there. I was just kind of like going through the motions. I'm like, you're going to just feel better if you just go do 100. So I'm like deciding to go leave. I'm like walking towards the locker room. I stop and I'm like, no, I'm going to go do it. So I go into one of like the classrooms at the gym and I start talking, and this guy's in there and he comes and he starts talking to me. And he then introduces me to his friend who just started this new app that had won an award for, I forget exactly what, but a Google award for the app. And it was like, oh, I want to introduce you to her. It was a mental health app. And so I ended up, because I decided to like force myself to do that, I ran into this guy who just started talking to me in the gym, who introduced me to his friend. And then she and I became really good friends and helped each other a lot with a lot of different things. It was just kind of this moment where we were able to kind of like come together. And we went to go get coffee for the first time. We ended up hanging out for like 7 hours. It was just... Yeah. And it was just this like incredible conversation. We were listening to music together. And so I just remember that was like one of the first times I was like, wow, if you like listen and you slow down and you pay attention, the universe talks to you. And that same thing that was telling me, just go do 100 push-ups, led me to this random guy recognizing me from TV to this, person who became a very good friend of mine. So it's just, I do think that if people listen, it is speaking to you and your intuition is speaking to you, right? And your spirit guide or whatever you want to call it. It's all speaking to you and it's all like interconnected in some way or another. And we just got to be open to it.
Right. Yeah, always. I think there's always like the potential, like we talk about the potential in people, the potential of the universe around us or our world around us is so unlimited that we don't even tap into any of that. But if we just understood that it is so unlimited and anything's possible, like we're only creating what our mind is allowing us to create. It's a small story.
Yeah.
But we can, if we look at every day nourishing and create a bigger story for ourselves, it's like wide open. But, I have to say also, a lot of people are scared of that. Because on some level, our bodies or our mind and our bodies and want to stay safe, and safe is the known, what's known. When we start to go into the unknown and we don't know what's going to happen, how much of that do we want to tap into? Because it's almost like it's there, all right? How do we bring that in to create?
It's scary.
Space for it's scary for a lot of people. It's scary. I mean, it's scary for me also. I don't know how you feel about it. Yeah.
Me too. I mean, I actively try to step into discomfort in certain areas. Now there's discomfort that isn't good to step into for sure. But like, if there's something that kind of scares me for some reason or another, like I'll dip my foot in and see, like, is this really that scary?
Right.
Or is it just change?
Right. or like, okay, what story am I telling myself about this situation?
That's so
Right.
true.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to the app really quickly. So you're kind of taking all of your learnings and all of the work that you've done and you do for years and years with your clients and all of your experience and putting it into this app experience for people.
Mhm.
So you're almost kind of like digitizing your experience and making it available for everyone, right?
I like that.
Uh, yeah. You can reach more people. You can make a bigger impact. What
Yeah.
can people expect? Like, what's the experience of downloading and joining the app and following the program?
So first of all, you get to pick from, there's basically 12 activations. And it's not like a one and done thing. You're not going
And
to,
can you? I should have asked this earlier. What's an activation?
it's a guided meditation,
Okay.
and it's very specific to this, whatever the theme is. So let's just say we were talking, oh, I have another one called I'm Not Enough. So that's a basic underlying feeling a lot of people have. So if we listen to that, I recommend listening to it at least twice a week. They're 45 minutes or a little bit longer. And I have also with that what I call a daily elixir, which is a card or a sheet of paper that you can read what the points are of it just to reinforce it. And then I have affirmations at the end of each section too, that you could kind of use as mantras also and listen to it. And I actually have an activation, uh, a mantra section that you can listen to. But what they can expect is to, even if they're not, sitting there listening to it, but it's listening to in the background, they can expect that some of these behaviors begin to shift, begin to, lighten up, begin to you could almost feel some of them shifting for you. And you almost could hear your voice noticing the shift because you're using a different tone of voice with yourself. Is the
Hmm.
experience that a lot of people have had. I've had it. A lot of people have had that. Um, but let me just tell you a few of the other ones because I think they're cleverly named too. What's in your inner fridge?
I want
I
to
have
talk about that one.
Okay, that's the triggers. But I have this other one I think it's really a really cool one. I actually myself have had like profound experience from this. It's called Setting the Table. And it talks about what happened when you were in your childhood and you were at the table and who was there, what was there, how were people talking, what was your role in the family? Because I believe what happens is you duplicate your how you did the table is kind of how you were in your family, and you kind of probably went through life, maybe in your job and maybe when you're with other people, and you kind of probably fall into the same roles that you always had. And this allows you to look at that because it's really a symbol for a mindset that we've carried from our childhood, right?
Yeah, that's
And
so interesting.
yeah, it's a big metaphor in life. And this is for me the most profound one of all of them.
Yeah.
And it's not really about eating. It's about how we did relationships at the table and what we didn't get, what needs didn't get met. And yeah, and then it can really shift around a lot of other things in your life. What I think is really important here is I have an activation called relationship healing pyramid. So it's really talking about um, bringing different relationships that you've had to another point where you change the perspective of it. Um, and you go back to different points where, um, let's just say you have problems with different, um, like a man would have a problem with a woman or, whatever. You go back to the origin of who created that relationship or that mindset for you.
Mm.
And you, in this healing pyramid that I call it, get to clear a lot of that up. It's like the person's actually almost feels like they're there with you, and they're willing, because you're really discussing your higher self with their higher self. This is really deep stuff. So,
I love this.
I know you get it, but if somebody listening to it, they're like, what's she talking about?
I know.
You really could, if you're really in tune and you're in this space in your body and your mind and your soul and everything, you're working on this. I also feel like there's an energy behind a lot of this also. It starts to present itself, and we get to look at that and just clear it. And it's like I said, it feels like the person's right there with you. And so many times in reality, in the outer world, the person changes the dynamic between them and that person.
That's so interesting. I honestly feel like a lot of people could probably use that, because people take a guilty as charged too. People take a lot of their past relationships and the trauma and they bring it into the next one. And then it becomes sabotaging. I mean, you're projecting your shit all over somebody else who didn't do anything to you.
Yeah. How many times have you heard somebody said, I heard them say that? And you're like, they didn't say that word. I heard them say, you didn't know what you were talking about. And you're like, they never said that, because you had.
I know.
Right?
Literally.
About, right?
Yes. I literally just had a conversation the other night with my girlfriend about that. And I was like, I told you, because I came home. I hope she doesn't listen to this, but I came home on Sunday. I came home from Indianapolis on Sunday. She was watching my dog. I went over to her house to hang out, pick up the dog, and I didn't stay. I came home and I was like, oh, I have to go home because I have a early meeting for work and I haven't been home for a few days. I just want to sleep in my bed, get up and start the week normal. Because I had early meetings, and she didn't hear that. She took it personally. And I was like, no, remember I said why? That's actually why. There's no hidden agenda. There's no secret meaning. I didn't leave because anything's wrong or anything like that. And so it does come up where people, even if they hear what you're saying, they're not always interpreting what you mean directly with your words.
Right.
And it's crazy that we bring that.
People have meaning into it, and it's based on all of the stuff from their childhood. So it's really, listen, if you did one thing for yourself, this is a good one, because it's not that costly, and you don't need to go to a therapist for this. But I mean, I think some people tune into the tone of somebody's voice. I know I'm guilty of that. And I hear something totally different than what's been said, just because a tone seems angry or sure or impatient with me. I'm projecting that on the other person. So it's nice to be responsible for your own actions and the way you think. I think that that's part of the healing process for your life. And it's part of the journey of nourishment.
That's very, very well said. And also, I'm guilty of being the tone. So if you ever feel that way, when we talk, it might actually be my tone. So,
well, it's so funny. I could do it with other people. I'm like, well, they don't really know me that well, so that's their tone. I could say that about other people, but when it comes to family, forget about it.
Oh my gosh, my family's tone, if I took that seriously, I would think they hated me all the time, no matter what.
Right. And that's what people are responding to in life.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So I think I encourage everyone to go check out the app. I think it sounds like, is it available on, I only saw it on Apple. Is it available on Android?
Yeah, no, it's only on Apple.
Okay, on Apple. Okay.
I know we're trying to figure that part out, but we wanted to put it out there. And
yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say that in your show notes, I'm offering a free month to all of your listeners.
Oh, that's outstanding.
I'm not sure got it yet, but they sent it to you. And
I'll look for it. If I didn't get it, I'll look for. Oh, you know what? I do remember, because we rescheduled and they sent it that. Yes. Okay. No, I do have that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's going to be in the show notes. The app is in the show notes with that special link. So our listeners can have a free month of the app, which is awesome, because then they can get a good taste of it.
Oh yeah. And then it's called the Nourish App, so they could find it on Apple. And also, my website's called Isabel, Isabel Chiara, CHIARA.com. And I would love people to check out that. My books are on there.
Yeah. So
And
I've got in the show notes will be your Instagram, your Facebook, your website, the books, the new free trial of the app, which is awesome, and anything else that we decide we want to put down there will be there. So easy click. I'm all about it. I in my job, it's all about path of least resistance. You want to have limit the clicks. So that's why all the links are in the show notes.
Right.
But before we wrap up here, I just wanted to give you a chance to ask me anything that you might have on your mind.
Okay, so I started asking this to you in the beginning. What made you start to do your podcast? You're very good
Yes.
on it, and you're interesting to
thank you.
speak to. So, what motivated you to start doing podcasts?
Well, thank you. It is a hard job, as I'm sure you know. Just going on an interview, and you had another one earlier today. It's kind of like I don't want to say it's performative because it's really not, but you got to put your on switch on. But I think with this, I've been listening to podcasts before they were cool. Like I've been listening to podcasts for a very, very long time. I probably listened to my first podcast maybe in like 2010. So I've always wanted to do one. I've always wanted to have one. I never really had an idea that I thought would keep me interested long enough to put the work in, because they're not easy. People might think they're easy. They're not easy. Like I'll record for an hour, hour and a half, and then it takes, a couple hours to edit, a couple hours to post and write the descriptions and all of that stuff. Even now with tools that, they help you. Like AI will write some pretty boring show notes, but it gets you kind of, motivated or inspired. Yeah. But then when I kind of had the idea for this, I saw this nonprofit organization. Wow, brain fart. Nonprofit organization that was called the Human Library. And what it was an organization that just paired people up so that with other humans, you could just hear their story and hear their experience and hear their expertise.
Oh.
And then it clicked to me. And I was like, wow, I'm like, what I really want to do is explore what's going on in my head. Like, what am I thinking about? I want to learn about people. I want to hear their personal stories, their personal experiences, have, experts in topics that are interesting to me on, but also like make them human, like make people human, show the human side of these people who maybe are experts in a field or have, extensive experience with something, and just give people space to sort of be human and tell their story and share their experience. And then on top of that, I think that, conventional thinking and a lot of the stuff we've talked about here, connecting yourself, your inner self to your higher self, to the universe, paying attention to it, all of that stuff. And so I just kind of was like, I'm going to do a podcast where I'm just talking to people that interest me and maybe have a topic I think more people should know about, or a topic that I want to learn more about, because then I can do that. And so once I kind of honed in on that and honed in on, talking about mental health and culture and like, even free speech and all of these things that I think are super important that people know and people explore topics that maybe aren't mainstream. That was when I was kind of like, oh, this is right up my alley. This is what I want to do. I want to talk to interesting people, hear their story, and learn from them.
Right. I have to tell you, this has been an unbelievable experience doing podcasts. I think that I've only done 5 so far.
That's good.
In the last 2 weeks. And I have made friends they're so interesting. The people that interviewed me are so interesting. And I'm actually friends with, like, I could text them and talk to them right now. It's so, and they're in your field, I mean, they understand, they understand you, and they're in your field, and they're drawn to your topic and your theme of your life. And so I have to say, it's been amazing. I never thought of it like that, but
you're getting kind of the experience that I would want someone to have who's, kind of breaking into this again. And I'm glad that you're having that experience, because it's nice to talk to like-minded people. It's nice to even learn from like-minded people.
Right. The chances of me meeting a guy out in Chicago are like nil.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I mean, I've had a great time. I had a great time when we were talking before we recorded, and even
Right.
more fun on the show. And two, I think it's that this is what's so cool and about podcasting is you can always have a list of questions. Like I usually do a couple of questions. I can talk to anybody, so I don't really need them, but I'll usually do it just to kind of have sort of my thoughts in a row. But
Mhm.
95% of the time, I don't need to even use those because it's just a conversation. And that's what's so cool about podcasting is it's not rigid interviews. It's not the news, right? You're not sitting down with Barbara Walters or 60 Minutes and having, this
Yeah,
intense
waiting for that
conversation.
next question.
Yeah, exactly. You're
And
actually
you're
just
gonna stumble.
exactly. You're just talking to people, and that's what
Right.
I think makes it so good and so good at connecting people that you would have, like you and I, never would have met otherwise.
Right. Well, I'm happy
Cool.
that I met you.
Yeah, me too. I think we'll probably be friends and keep in touch too.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And all of those links that you said earlier, your book, your website, your social
Mhm.
medias, your the app with a 30-day trial, those will all be in the show notes. And thanks for coming on. We'll have to do this again sometime. I think we could probably keep talking.
Okay. I think so too. All right.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.